Emily Carter worked at a small, busy diner in the heart of the city. Every day, she wore the same uniform, a pale blue apron over a simple black shirt, her hair always tied back in a neat bun. She took orders, carried plates, cleaned tables, and smiled at customers who hardly looked her in the eye. To most people, she was just a quiet waitress, not someone they would remember once they left the diner. She never spoke too much, never complained, and never caused trouble. The owner of the diner, Mr. Halloran, was a grumpy older man who cared more about fast service than the people working for him. He didn't know Emily's full name, called her Kid, or just pointed when he wanted something. The regulars came and went. Some tipped well, some didn't tip at all. Some smiled. Others barked out orders like she was a robot. Emily just nodded and kept working. She wasn't the kind of person who needed praise or attention. She had learned a long time ago how to stay invisible. It made life easier that way. But what no one knew, not Mr. Halloran, not the customers, not even her coworkers, was that Emily had a secret. A quiet, beautiful, deeply personal secret that she kept hidden from the world. She was a pianist, not just someone who could play a little. She could really play. And not because she had gone to some fancy music school. She had never been able to afford that. Everything she knew she had learned on her own, with her fingers, her ears, and her heart. Emily had grown up in a small town, far from the city. Her mother used to work as a cleaner in an old church. While her mother scrubbed floors and cleaned pews, little Emily would sit near the piano. It was dusty and slightly out of tune, but it had a kind of magic. One day, when no one was watching, she climbed onto the bench and pressed a key. Then another. The sounds fascinated her. They were like whispers from another world. Slowly. Over. Weeks and months, she taught herself to play simple songs. Her fingers were small, but her ears were sharp. She could hear something once and try to copy it. Her mother noticed. Of course, but they were too poor to afford lessons or their own instrument. Still, every time they visited the church, Emily sat at that piano, teaching herself melodies, making mistakes, learning again. Over the years, she became better. She could play anything she heard. Her heart lived in music, even if her life was full of struggles. When her mother passed away, Emily was still a teenager. She had no one else, so she moved to the city to start over. She found a cheap room above a laundromat and took whatever job she could get. Eventually, she landed the waitress job at the diner. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid rent and kept her fed. And most importantly, it was close to the one place she felt at peace. Across the street from the diner was an old church ferry, much like the one she grew up visiting. It wasn't used much anymore. Sometimes people came in to light candles or pray, but most days it stood empty and quiet. Emily found out that it stayed unlocked at night for late-night visitors or lost souls needing peace. She started going there after her shifts. At first, she just sat in the back, remembering her mother. Then, one night, she walked up to the piano. It was a beautiful grand piano, worn by time, but still full of life. She lifted the cover gently, like greeting an old friend, and placed her fingers on the keys. She played a simple tune at first, something soft and slow. The sound filled the empty church like warm light. It was like the piano remembered her, like it had been waiting. From that night on, Emily played there every evening after work, sometimes for 10 minutes. For hours, no one saw her. No one heard her. But the music was real. The life Emily lived during the day was plain and unnoticed. She wiped ketchup from tables, smiled at rude customers, and carried heavy trays. But the life she lived at night was full of feeling. Her fingers danced across keys. She played with her heart. She didn't need an audience. She didn't want fame. Music wasn't for the world. It was for her. It was how she remembered who she really was, when everything else made her feel small. She had dreams once of becoming a concert pianist, performing on a stage, of people hearing her music and feeling something deep inside. But dreams cost. Money and time and support. She had none of that. So she did what she had to. She worked. She survived. She hid her gift because there was no room for it in the life she was living. Sometimes, during slow hours at the diner, she would glance at the dusty upright piano near the entrance. It hadn't been tuned in years. No one really played it. It was more of a decoration than a real instrument. Sometimes children banged on it. Once a man tried to play a song and broke a key. Mr. Halloran just rolled his eyes and said, "Useless." Emily never asked to touch it. She didn't want to draw attention, but she noticed it every day. She sat there, silent and ignored like her. No one at the diner suspected a thing. To them, she was just the girl who brought their food, cleaned up their mess, and didn't speak unless spoken to. Some people liked her quiet nature. Some found it odd, but no one thought much about her at all. Emily didn't mind. Not really. She had learned to live like a shadow. It kept her safe, kept her from getting hurt, sometimes late at night. In the church, when her fingers made the piano sing, she would wonder, what if someone heard her? What if someone truly listened? But she would shake that thought away. It was a foolish dream. Real life didn't work like that. She was a waitress. That was it. Music was a secret she would take to her grave. Still, every night she returned. To the church, she played with tears in her eyes, with memories in her chest, with dreams tucked away in every note. She didn't play for money or praise. She played because she had to, because it was the only place where she could truly breathe. And so her days continued, serving coffee, washing dishes, smiling when she felt like crying, always watching the piano in the corner, always returning to the one across the street. She lived two lives, one of silence and one of music, and she never imagined they would ever collide. But fate has strange ways of finding those who try to hide. And one rainy night, everything would change. It was a cold, rainy afternoon, and the diner was full of noise and warmth. People sat at their tables eating burgers, fries, and sipping coffee, trying to escape the storm outside. The windows were fogged up, and the smell of fried food filled the air. Emily moved quickly from table to table, carrying plates, wiping spills, and trying to stay calm. Her shoes were soaked from her walk to work, and the back of her neck was damp from the rain that had slipped under her collar. Still, she kept her smile on. The same tired but polite smile she wore every day. At one of the tables near the door, a large family was celebrating a child's birthday. They had brought balloons, noisemakers, and even a small cake. The little girl, who had just turned 8, pointed at the upright piano sitting near the entrance of the diner and shouted, "I want someone to play Happy Birthday." The parents laughed, and the father walked over to the piano. It had been sitting there for years, dusty and forgotten. No one ever played it seriously. Sometimes a drunk customer would press a few keys, but it was mostly used as decoration. Father tried to play the birthday song, but the piano made strange sounds. One of the keys stuck, and another one made no sound at all. The man laughed and said, "Well, this old thing's broken." Everyone returned to their seats, and the little girl looked disappointed. The moment passed, and the noise of the diner continued. But Emily had been watching. Later, during her short break, she walked over to the piano. She touched the keys gently and pressed them one by one. Some worked, some didn't. One of the middle keys made a strange clicking sound, like something was stuck inside. She knew that feeling. It was like hearing someone try to speak but fail to find the words. She asked Mr. Halloran, the owner, "Sir, would it be okay if I tried to fix the piano? It's just in my spare time." Mr. Halloran didn't even look up from his notepad. "Sure," he said, waving his hand. "It's useless anyway." That was all she needed. Over the next few nights, Emily stayed late after her shift ended. When the diner was closed and the lights were dim, she took out a small toolkit she kept in her bag. Carefully, she opened the front of the piano. She cleaned out the dust, fixed the loose key, and gently oiled the parts that had rusted. She didn't have professional tools or training, but her fingers knew what to do. She treated the piano like an injured bird, soft and careful, afraid to break it more. It took her almost a week, working bit by bit. Finally, one night, the piano sounded clear again. Still old and out of tune, but the keys worked, and that was enough for her. She looked around the empty diner. No one was there. Just the sound of rain tapping on the windows and the soft hum of the refrigerator. Emily sat down on the piano bench. Her hands hovered above the keys. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and began to play. It started soft, gentle notes, rising like morning light. Then deeper, richer tones filled the space. Melody she had written herself. It didn't have a name. She just called it Rain because that's how it felt, soft at first, then heavy, full of emotion. Her hands moved gracefully, like water. Her face was calm, but inside, her heart poured into every note. She played with her eyes closed. Lost in the music, what Emily didn't know was that someone was watching. Just minutes before, a man had entered the diner. He wasn't a customer. He was simply trying to escape the rain. He had just come from the airport and was walking to his hotel nearby when the storm caught him by surprise. His coat was soaked and his briefcase was dripping. He saw the lights on in the diner and stepped inside, thinking he'd wait there for a bit. The man's name was Michael Reinhardt. He was a music producer from New York, known in the industry for discovering unique talent. He had an ear for music and a heart that still believed in real passion, even in a world filled with auto-tune and fake fame. He had produced albums for famous pianists and helped struggling musicians find their way to the stage. But for the past year, he had been feeling tired. Everything he heard sounded the same. He had come to this city for a charity concert, hoping to clear his mind. When he entered the diner, it was empty. The chairs were up on some of the tables, and the lights were low. He saw a girl sitting at the piano. She didn't see him. He stood quietly near the entrance, not wanting to disturb her, and then he heard it. The music stopped him in his tracks. He had heard beautiful music, before played by professionals in concert halls with perfect instruments. But this was different. It was raw, emotional, pure. The way she played was like someone speaking from the deepest part of the soul. He felt something stir in his chest. A tightness, a quiet ache. The music wasn't just notes. It was a story. A story of someone who had loved, lost, hoped, and survived. Michael stayed frozen near the wall, not daring to move. The music washed over him like a wave. His eyes became wet, and he didn't even realize it. When Emily finished, she sat still. For a moment, then she opened her eyes, stood up, and carefully closed the piano. She turned to leave when she saw him. She froze, smiled gently, and said, "Don't worry. I didn't mean to scare you. I was just passing by. And then I heard you play." Emily was shocked. Her face turned pale. "I'm sorry. I didn't know anyone was here," she whispered, almost like she had done something wrong. No, he said quickly. "Please don't apologize. That was incredible. You're very talented." She looked down and tried to brush it off. "It's just a hobby." Michael took a few steps closer. "You know who I am?" he asked carefully. Emily shook her head. "I'm Michael Reinhardt. I produce music. I work with pianists all over the world." She stared at him, unsure if he was joking or crazy. He reached into his coat and handed her a card. She took it with shaking hands. "I've heard many pianists," he continued. "But what I heard tonight, what you just played, it was something special. I've been looking for someone like you for a long time." Emily couldn't believe what she was hearing. Her heart was racing. She had spent years hiding her gift, thinking no one would ever hear it. And now, suddenly, a stranger who worked in the music world had walked in out of the rain and told her she had something special. She wanted to believe it, but fear held her back. "I'm not trained," she said softly. "I didn't go to school for music. I don't even own a piano." Michael smiled kindly. "You don't need any of that. You have something most trained musicians don't. You play with real feeling. It can't be taught." Millie didn't know what to say. She nodded slowly, still unsure. "Would you mind," he asked gently, "if I came back tomorrow? Maybe record a little? Just a short clip? I won't post it unless you say yes." She hesitated. Then, almost in a whisper, said, "Okay." Michael smiled and nodded. "Thank you, truly. You have no idea what you just gave me tonight." He left quietly, stepping back into the rain. But this time, with a spark in his heart. Emily stood there, staring at the card in her hand. She couldn't believe what had just happened. For years, she had lived in silence, played in shadows, hidden her gift like a secret shame. But now, someone had heard her, and everything was about to change. The next morning, Emily woke up earlier than usual. Her heart was still racing from what had happened the night before. She kept staring at the small business card on her bedside table. Michael Reinhardt, music producer. The words looked serious. Professional, even important. But in her tiny room above the laundromat, with cracked walls and a leaky ceiling, it felt almost unreal. She held the card like it might vanish if she blinked. She made herself a simple breakfast, just tea and a slice of bread. She didn't feel hungry. She kept thinking about the moment she turned around and saw Michael standing there watching her. It had been like someone opening a door she thought would always stay locked. A stranger had listened to her music, truly listened, and now he wanted to record her. Why? What did he see in her? At the diner, she worked her shift as usual. No one knew anything about what had happened. The regulars came in, ordered the same meals, left the same tips or none at all. Mr. Halloran shouted from the kitchen, same as always. Tanya, her co-worker and closest friend, noticed something was different. "You're quiet today," she said while wiping a table. More than usual, Emily gave a small smile. Just tired, I guess. She didn't know how to explain what had happened, and a part of her was scared it might not be real. Maybe Michael would never come back. Maybe he had just been being kind. But deep inside her, a spark had been lit, and it was growing. After her shift ended and the diner was nearly empty, Michael returned. He was wearing a clean suit and carried a small camera and a sound recorder in a leather case. Emily saw him through the front window and felt her heart jump. She wiped her hands on her apron and walked over to meet him. "Hi," he said, smiling warmly. "Hope I'm not too late." She shook her head. "No, I just finished." "Great. Do you still want to do this? We can stop anytime you feel uncomfortable." Emily looked down, took a deep breath, and nodded. "I'm ready." They walked over to the old piano by the door, the same one Emily had fixed in secret. She sat down, placed her hands on the keys, and looked up at him. "Is it okay if I play something I wrote?" Michael's eyes lit up. "Please do." Emily closed her eyes and began to play. The piece didn't have a name, but she had written it during a time when she felt completely invisible. It was soft at first, then slowly grew louder, more emotional. It sounded like loneliness, like hope fighting its way out of a dark place. Her fingers moved with grace, no hesitation. For those few minutes, nothing else existed. Only the piano and her heart speaking through it. Michael didn't say a word. He just held the camera steady and recorded every second. When she finished, the diner was completely silent. Michael stopped the camera and looked at her with awe. That was breathtaking. Emily blushed and looked away. "It's not perfect. It's real," he replied. "It's better than perfect." He thanked her again and promised not to share the video unless she said yes. She nodded, but in her mind, she still wasn't sure what to do. Later that night, Michael sat in his hotel room and played the video again and again. He couldn't believe what he had found. A waitress in a small diner playing music that sounded like it came from a concert hall. But what made it special wasn't just her skill, it was her emotion. Her story could be felt in every note. He posted the video on his social media page with a short caption. "The most powerful performance I've heard in years came from a waitress in a diner playing an old piano she fixed herself. Meet Emily." He didn't tag her. He didn't give away the diner's name. He just shared the music. He closed his laptop and went to bed. By morning, the video had gone viral. Thousands of people had watched it overnight. Then hundreds of thousands. Then millions. Comments flooded in. "I've never cried listening to piano before. Who is she? Hey, this is better than anything I've heard on the radio all year. There's so much emotion in her playing. It hurts in a beautiful way. Isn't she famous?" Michael's inbox filled with messages from journalists, record labels, music teachers, and fans. Everyone wanted to know who this mysterious pianist was. But he stayed silent. He waited to speak with Emily first. That day, Emily didn't check social media. She didn't even own a proper phone, just an old model for calls and messages. Had no idea that millions of people had heard her play. She walked into work like usual, tied her apron, and started pouring coffee. But Tanya was staring at her phone with wide eyes. "Emily," she gasped. "You're trending on the internet." Emily blinked. Tanya turned her phone around. "This is you, right?" On the screen was a video of Emily sitting at the diner's piano playing the same piece she had played for Michael. Her name wasn't in the caption, but the video was clearly her. Emily felt dizzy. He posted it. Tanya grabbed her hand. "Girl, you need to read the comments. People are going crazy. They love you. Like, really love you. You might be famous. Right now." Emily couldn't believe it. She sat down in the break room, her hands shaking. Tanya brought her the phone again. Emily scrolled through the comments. So many kind words, so much love. People from all over the world had written messages. Some said her music had touched their hearts. Others said it reminded them of their own pain and hope.
Our way.
Well, what? Well, we're like, why would we rock or to the why don't?
My son hasn't spoken in weeks. He heard this and asked me to play it again. Thank you. Tears filled Emily's eyes. For the first time, she felt seen. Not just as a waitress or a quiet girl in the background, but as someone who mattered, someone who had something to offer. But she also felt scared. This wasn't a small step. This was a storm. Her private world was now public. That evening, Michael came to see her again. She didn't even need to ask how it went. "I should have asked first," he said gently. "I'm sorry, but I promise I didn't expect." "This," Emily nodded slowly. "It's okay. I didn't think people would care." "They care," he said. "They really care." He handed her a printed list of invitations. Interviews, music shows, radio stations. People wanted her to perform, to share her story. Emily felt overwhelmed. "I don't know if I can do all." "This," she whispered. "You don't have to do everything," Michael said, "but this is your chance. You have something rare, something people need to hear." She looked at him, still unsure. "What if I mess up? What if I don't belong in that world?" "You already belong," he said softly. "You just never had a door to walk through. Now it's open." Emily thought of her mother, of the dusty piano in the old church, of the years she played alone, thinking no one would ever listen. Now, the world was listening. The next day, the diner had more visitors than usual. Some came just to see her. A few even asked for pictures. Mr. Halloran was confused but pleased with the extra business. "Whatever you did, kid, keep doing it," he said, though he still didn't use her name. Emily smiled shyly, but said nothing. She was still the same girl. The apron hadn't changed, but something inside her had. At night, she walked to the old church and sat at the grand piano. She placed her fingers on the keys and took a deep breath. She didn't feel so alone anymore. She played a new melody, one filled with nervous hope. With new beginnings, with fear and excitement mixed like colors in the rain. Her song didn't have words, but it said everything. Outside, the city lights flickered. Inside, her music burned quietly like a candle in the dark finally noticed. Finally heard. The week after the video went viral was like nothing Emily had ever experienced in her life. Everything around her felt strange and unreal. One day she was a simple diner waitress who fixed a broken piano for fun. Now she was being called a musical. genius, hidden talent, and even the sole pianist by strangers on the internet. But even as her name slowly started spreading, Emily still walked to work, tied on her apron, and served coffee just like always. A few people came in to see her, some asked for selfies. But she kept her head down and continued doing her job. Inside, she was scared. She had spent years hiding, playing her music in empty rooms, whispering her feelings into piano keys no one else could hear. Now, the world was listening, and she didn't know if she was ready. She didn't know how to be someone important. What if she made a mistake? What if it all went wrong? But one afternoon, everything changed again. Michael returned to the diner. This time, not alone. With him was a woman named Clara Jenkins, the director of a major city gala that supported young artists and musicians. Clara had seen Emily's video and had been deeply moved. She offered Emily a chance to play live at their upcoming event. It wasn't just any performance, it was a black-tie charity gala attended by musicians, actors, business people, and important names in the art world. It was a stage that had launched many artists' careers. Emily's heart dropped. She felt like she couldn't breathe. She looked at Michael, her voice soft and nervous. "You want me to play in front of people?" Clara smiled gently. "Just people, the right people, the ones who can take your music places you've never imagined." "I've never performed," Emily whispered. "Not on a real stage. I've only ever played alone." Michael nodded. "That's okay. You don't need to do anything fancy. Just be you." Emily wanted to say no. She wanted to run and hide. But something in Clara's eyes told her this was more than a performance. It was a chance. A big one. And in that moment, she remembered the feeling she had when she played in the church alone. When her heart spoke through her music, and she realized maybe, just maybe, someone else needed to hear that voice too. "I'll do it," she said quietly. The gala was only 2 weeks away, and Emily's life began to move faster than she could handle. She was invited to meet with sound engineers, dress designers, and stylists. People wanted to interview her, ask her about her story, her background, her dreams. She didn't have fancy words to give them. She didn't know how to act in front of cameras. She was just a girl who loved playing the piano. Tanya, her best friend and co-worker at the diner, became her biggest cheerleader. Tanya helped her pick out a dress for the event, a simple black gown that wasn't too shiny or loud. Emily wanted something plain, something that still felt like her. Tanya even did her makeup the night of the gala, keeping it soft and natural. "You look like a princess," Tanya said. Stepping back with a proud smile, Emily looked at herself in the mirror and didn't recognize the girl staring back. She wasn't scared anymore, at least not the kind of fear that made her freeze. This time it felt more like butterflies, nervous, but alive. The gala was held in a huge hall with golden lights, long tables, and a grand stage. People dressed in suits and gowns walked around sipping wine and chatting. Emily stood quietly near the edge of the room, holding her hands together, trying not to shake. Michael stayed by her side and gave her small smiles every few minutes to help her feel calm. When it was time, the host walked up to the microphone and said, "Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we are honored to introduce a rising star. Someone whose music touched hearts around the world from the corner of a small diner. Please welcome Emily Carter." Applause filled the room as she stepped onto the stage. Her knees felt weak. The bright lights made it hard to see the crowd. But then she saw the grand piano in the center of the stage, shown under the lights. Smooth and perfect, waiting for her. She walked slowly, sat down, took a deep breath. For a moment she closed her eyes. She didn't think about the people watching. She didn't think about being perfect. She just thought about her mother, about the church where she had first played, about the rainy night when Michael first heard her. She placed her hands on the keys and began to play. It started as a whisper, soft and gentle, like her heart was testing the air. Then the melody grew, richer, fuller, each note building on the next like waves rolling in. She played the piece she had written during her loneliest days, when music was the only thing keeping her going. The room became silent. People leaned in. Some closed their eyes. Some held their breath. It It was more than music. It was a story. Story of a quiet girl who had something to say. And finally, the world was ready to hear it. When she finished, there was silence. Then the entire room stood up and applauded. The sound was loud, full, and real. Emily stood slowly, her hands still trembling. She gave a small bow, her eyes glistening with tears. Backstage, Clara hugged her. "You didn't just play, Emily. You spoke to them." Michael smiled with pride. "I told you, you belong here." That night, everything changed. Offers started coming in. Labels wanted to work with her. Their musicians wanted to collaborate. Her story was written in newspapers, shared on television, even mentioned on radio shows. But Emily stayed grounded. She still went to the church at night to play for herself. She still visited the diner when she could. She hadn't forgotten where she came from. Even Mr. Halloran seemed to look at her differently now. He didn't say much, but once he nodded and said, "You made us proud, kid." That was all. But for Mr. Halloran, that was a big deal. Emily didn't become someone else. She didn't let the fame change her heart. She just let the music speak louder. She gave interviews, but always spoke honestly. She told people how she had no training, no fancy school. She told them about fixing the diner piano in secret, about playing alone in a church, and people loved her even more for it. Because in a world full of polished performances, Emily was real. One day, a music teacher from another city sent her a message. She had shown Emily's video to her student kids who came from poor homes, who couldn't afford lessons or instruments. The teacher said, "You gave them hope. They see you and believe, maybe they can do it too." Emily cried. Reading that message, that was what mattered to her, not fame, not money, not being called a star. It was the chance to help others feel the way she felt when she played, like their voice mattered. She started working on her first album, but she didn't want it to be just polished recordings. She wanted to include some pieces played on old pianos, just like the one in the diner. She called the album After the Shift, to remind herself and others where it all began. At the same time, she stayed connected to her old life. Tanya remained her best friend, and Emily often visited the diner just to talk and sit in the back booth, where she used to take her breaks. The broken piano near the door had been replaced with a new one, donated by someone anonymous, though Emily had a feeling she knew who. A small gold plaque was placed on it. It read, "To the girl who made silence sing." Emily never wanted to be famous. All she ever wanted was to be heard. And now that she was, she used her voice not to show off, but to lift others up. Her life had changed completely. But in her heart, she was still the girl who played after her shift, with no one watching and everything to say. After the gala, Emily's life transformed in ways she had never imagined. The performance she gave had touched the hearts of everyone who listened. Suddenly, doors that had once seemed locked forever were opening wide for her. But despite the sudden fame and the rush of invitations to play on stages all over the city and beyond, Emily stayed true to herself, remembered every quiet night at the church piano, every lonely hour spent practicing by herself, and she knew that the music she made came from a deep, honest place inside her. It wasn't about glory or applause. It was about the feelings that music could bring out: hope, sadness, joy, and sometimes healing. Soon after the gala, Emily started working on her first album. She named it After the Shift, as a tribute to the life she led before anyone knew her story. Each song was like a chapter in her journey, from the early days of hiding in shadows to the night Michael heard her play, to the bright lights of the gala. The album wasn't full of flashy, overproduced tracks. Instead, it had simple piano melodies, warm and gentle, that spoke directly to the heart. Some songs were quiet and soft like whispers, and others were stronger, full of determination and courage. Many people bought the album, and the reviews were kind and thoughtful. Critics praised her natural talent and said her music was refreshingly real and full of honest emotion. But more important to Emily were the messages she received from listeners, people who told her music helped them through hard times, who said it gave them peace when life felt difficult. With the success of her album, Emily didn't forget where she came from. She knew that many young musicians didn't have the opportunities or the resources to learn music the way she had dreamed of. So, she decided to give back. She started a small foundation to help kids from poor neighborhoods get music lessons, buy instruments, and have a safe place to practice. She believed that everyone deserved a chance to express themselves through music, no matter their background. At the diner, things had changed too. The old broken piano that had sat forgotten near the door was replaced by a beautiful new grand piano, shiny and polished. It was a gift from a secret donor, someone who admired Emily's story and wanted to support her roots. On the piano was a small plaque that read, "To the girl who turned silence into music." The diner's customers noticed the new piano, and sometimes they asked about it. Emily would smile and tell them the story of how a quiet waitress became a pianist who touched the world's heart. Tourists and music fans began visiting the diner, hoping to catch a glimpse of Emily or hear a live performance. Let the attention change her. She still worked a few shifts a week, sometimes just to keep her feet on the ground and remember the simple life she once had. She enjoyed the familiar sounds of the kitchen, the friendly chatter of regular customers, and the peaceful moments before the morning rush. Her friendship with Tanya stayed strong. Tanya had been there from the very beginning, cheering Emily on, believing in her when no one else did. They laughed together about old times and talked about new dreams. Tanya was proud, not just because Emily had become famous, but because she had never lost her kindness and humility. Emily's music career continued to grow. She was invited to play at concert halls, on television shows, and at music festivals. But no matter how busy her schedule became, she always made time to visit the old church. Sitting at the grand piano there, she felt connected to her mother's memory and to the quiet nights when music had been her only friend. It was her sanctuary, a place to recharge and find inspiration. Her story inspired many. People saw her as proof that talent could come from anywhere, and that sometimes the greatest gifts were hidden in the most unlikely places. Emily never wanted to be seen as a star. She wanted to be a voice for anyone who felt invisible or forgotten. Years passed, and Emily's music continued to touch lives. She gave workshops and spoke at schools, encouraging young people to follow their passions, no matter how impossible they seemed. Her foundation helped hundreds of children find their own musical voices. She believed deeply that music had the power to heal, to unite, and to give hope. Emily Carter's journey from a quiet waitress to a celebrated pianist was more than a story of success. It was a story about courage, about believing in yourself when no one else does, and about the power of kindness and perseverance. She showed the world that sometimes the most extraordinary talent is found in the most ordinary places, waiting patiently to be discovered. And so, Emily's music played on not just in concert halls or on albums, but in the hearts of everyone who listened. Her legacy was not just the notes she played, but the hope she gave to those who dreamed of being heard. The waitress who once served coffee and wiped tables had become a symbol of unexpected brilliance and quiet strength, reminding us all that sometimes the most beautiful music comes from the most unexpected places.